How are we? Or good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. Welcome to the live training sessions that we have here at Unity Technologies, usually once or twice a week. And as Tish says, about this time. We do reserve the right to be able to chop and change the time around, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. It seems to be habitually Mondays at 8 o'clock, which was set by Mike Geig and his schedule in the United States. Accent aside, I'm broadcasting out of Britain, north of London. So this is my afternoon. It's 8 o'clock in the evening. It's 8 o'clock in the evening, though it's still bright daylight outside here. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Unity tips and tricks. And this is going to be sort of a junk shop, flea market smorgasbord of little things that I thought don't really roll up into any particular session. What's my first pro tip? Pro tip number one, it's Unity. It's not Unity3D. Unity3D is the domain, and that's just because, heck, if you look for Unity as a domain, they're taken up by all sorts of things, electronics, parts distributors, churches, you name it. So Unity3D is our domain name, but the name of the product is Unity. So whenever you're writing about it, don't use Unity3D. Hey, those guys at Unity3D are great. Those are arguably the people hosting our website. The other one is Mechanim. Where am I going to go? Let's go to documentation. And then let's search the manual for Mechanim. Oh, that's not going to work because there's no H. So another pro tip, it's Mechanim with a C. Come back here, silly little thing. Autocomplete. Mechanim! So Mechanim with a C, not a CH. Let's our two little pro tips. It's Unity and not Unity3D, and Mechanim with a C, not Mechanim with a CH. So we'll go back and take a look at our Learn site. It's a little bit circular. I know you wouldn't be here if you didn't know what the Learn site was about, but I do think it's important to talk about that there's the Learn site, there is the tutorials, the documentation, obviously here the live training in our community. When we're looking at the community, when you look at the forums, fantastic place to do to get our answers. We've got our support team pushing really hard to get to as many people as possible on the forum. We've been asking our devs to spend more attention on the forum as well. What I want to show here, though, is teaching section. Don't forget that we also have the teaching section, and this is where we're going to have our Q&A for our live training sessions and our tutorials. There's the Q&A for the free live online training that you're doing now. So if you want to make questions, comments, suggestions, you want to think of a subject you want us to teach, come to us here at the free live online training for Unity Technologies thread. Official learning resources, where to start. You're just getting started, come here. You have a friend that needs to get started, point them at that thread that gives us a quick overview of what's going on. And answers. I like answers because if you need a discussion with someone, stay on the forum. If you want an answer to your question, come to answers, post your questions here, and that question and answer feedback. You can see this one has 2 answers and 3,000 views. And someone has chosen their best answer. But there is a little bit of a hidden thing that I'm not sure that people know about under the in the Unity site, which is unity3d.com/search. And then this is a Google custom search engine that is restricted to all things Unity. So if you wanted to search for, I don't know, scriptable objects, it'll return, starting off, we can see our documentation, stuff and answers. None of this is anywhere off-piste as it would be. This is everything that is in the Unity3D world, so you're not going to get, the custom search engine is going to constrain it into finding out about Unity. And you can see up here, all answers documentation. You can constrain it even farther and say, I just want to find out about scriptable objects here in the documentation or in the Learn section. So you can, so it's a nice little bit of information there as to where to search for stuff. But our documentation goes farther than that. When we're looking at code, let's see, do I have any code up? Oh, yes. Now this is something we'll get into a little bit later on, something I plan to talk about. If you want to find out anything, when you're in our documentation and you're in your scripting reference like we are now, and you want to find out about, let's find out about something that we want to know about, say a rigid body. you can select any term that we have in our scripting reference, and you can hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows, and then the single quote key. And that will pop you into the documentation. And we can see that it is everything in our scripting API that has to do with rigid body, with the that base rigid body here at the top. So when you're writing your scripts and you're in your script editor and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, you can get some help with some code completion. But if you want to look at our documentation, I'm trying to think of something that's particularly Unity-like. Collider. Select that, Command on the Mac, Control on Windows, single quote, and there we go, right into the documentation. So there's the collider, attached body, bounds. So we can go straight to the documentation from our scripting package. Some of the third-party scripting packages also include that same shortcut. So give it a try if you're running somebody else's third-party solution. I know that there are some in-editor applications that you can get that run scripting inside Unity, which you'd need to get from the asset store, which is also a good pro tip. Get stuff from the asset store. They also often use that Command or Control single quote to take you straight to the documentation. Sorry, I'm doing two things at once. Let me come back to the chat. Hybrid25, you use Google search. Yes, but this is a Google search, but it's constrained amongst all of our sites. So it's just nice that it's already laid out, and you can just get to it by going to unity3d.com/search, and you know that you're not going to get anything else that's unrelated. I'd say the only thing for me that's missing here is MSDN. There is a custom search that's in my footer that is an older custom search engine that also includes Reddit and MSDN and some of the other places. The artwork, so Absray, the 2D Catch Game live session is actually in a thing called the 2D pack, which I think I can get to. I'll just show you on the asset store here. SAS, I have an asset store. No, we don't want that. Just, what's that? Go away. Asset store. Let's see what we get. Unity's asset store. Thank you. And we're looking for the 2D pack. Now, we had some problems with the asset store earlier today. They were doing some planned maintenance, so I'm hoping it's not down on the web as well, because there's an upgrade. We're adding localization to other cultures in other countries, so I believe it's come out in Korean. And so there was some planned downtime that may be either slowing things down or making it inaccessible. Okay, so but it's on there on the website as 2D pack. And you can find out all of the 2D assets from that and other 2D games. The shortcut key to Windows from MD is Control plus single quote. On the Mac, it's Command plus single quote. Tish, from what I gather, you can't, scriptable objects, you cannot save data at runtime, as far as I'm aware. So, back on track for tips and tricks. That's still doing documentation and coding stuff. The other thing that I think it's worth noting is code tags. When we're in the forum and we are writing a post, we want to know about something, we want to ask a question, and we want to post code, use code tags. Now, I've got two posts on this, one in the Unity support forum and one in the scripting forum. And it basically, we need to surround your code by, in brackets, code and slash code. And this describes it in detail, but essentially if your code is in code tags, it will display properly in the forum. If not, it's going to look like text and it'll get rid of the white space. It's really hard to read. But the other thing that's very useful, coming back to our documentation, is that all of the items that are tagged in Unity's API have quick connects as well. So you want to find out about instantiate, you can click through directly from the code inside the forum. So if you have some questions, you're looking at code in the forum, you're reading someone's post, and you think, what does that do? I mean, how does instantiate work? Or what about destroy? You can click it, and you can find our documentation on it. So you can go straight from the code snippet, whether it's somebody answering your question, so someone posts code back to you, or you are reading somebody else's code and you want to find out more information and you're on the forum and you don't want to go digging out that you don't want to go digging out your scripting reference. You can click through directly to the scripting reference from the forum just by following the links. The shortcut in MonoDevelop you need to select, let's go back to MonoDevelop. You need to select something that Unity cares about, not something that you've written. I've written something called inventory item, command single quote will give me a search for inventory item, but it's not going to return anything. So MonoDevelop, it should be command single quote, and the single quote button holding at the same time is, you know, like the apostrophe, and or control single quote on Windows. Will there be any live sessions about coroutines anytime soon? Put a request in on the forum, and I'll start scheduling that in. I've got stuff scheduled for the next 2 to 4 weeks, and I don't have coroutines outside of where we use them in games, but we can do that. Put a request in, and we'll see what we can do about getting one out there. Mitralone, it should jump to the correct line. If it doesn't, I don't know. We'll take a look. If you have a German keyboard, you need to press Command Shift single quote. Some of these are quite literal, because I know that MonoDevelop, like to make the type size bigger, is Command plus, but the plus is the shift over the equal sign, so I have to do Command Shift plus to get it to get bigger. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong computer there. 2 computers running. Command Shift plus, and that gets bigger and smaller. Whereas if I hit just the command button and the same key that has the plus sign on it, I'm actually doing Command equals, and it doesn't work. So if your single quote is on the upper part of, and you need the Shift key, you probably have to hold that down as well. One other thing while we're on the forum, here's a little trick. Completely unrelated to Unity per se, but it can be very useful if you're wanting to find a question, an answer to a question, and you're making a post. I'm going to do a temp one here. I'm writing a response. This is my response. I want to ask another question. I want to show more detail. Here is a screen capture. And then I capture the screen. Oh, come back here. There we go. But I'm using Dropbox. And frustratingly enough, when I didn't want to do that. Come back here. When I try to make an image from Dropbox, the URL isn't going to work, because it's going to the World Wide Web and it's an embedded page. But if you simply change www to DL for download, it'll insert the picture. So, hey, is that a pro tip that has nothing to do with Unity? But it's very useful when you're posting things on the forum and you need to include that screenshot, or you need to include an image that you're hosting on your Dropbox. You can change www to DL, and the forum will be able to display that image. Now, another bit, when we're here about answering questions and trying to find solutions, you want to ask a question, you want to have a quick response? Well, how about IRC? Hello, you are all live on my training session. Say hello. So this is the IRC. Some people look at me and say, IRC is still going on? Well, we've got 206 users currently online. And where do you find out more about this? Well, if you go to our community page, and down here, Unity Chat, and they give some links to some clients that you can use, because you do need an IRC client, or a client that will run with IRC. And it's, I guess, hashtag at this point, pound Unity3D, on irc.freenode.net. And here you can ask questions of people live. If you're polite and you're nice about it, they often get back to you. There's also a fun chat channel that you can read here. So please be aware of IRC. Come contribute. Pay it forward as well. If you're working from home, you want to be able to talk to other people who are in Unity. We've got 95 people in the chat side and 206 people on the working side. So please drop by chat. Come say hi. Now, there's some particular pages that I think are important to know about in our documentation. This one I did not know about. When going through the manual, scripting pages, scripting overview, execution order of events and functions. When you're dealing with scripting, sometimes it's very important to know which things are going to happen before other things or after other things. And this particular page, manual execution order, goes ahead and talks about it. And not only does it describe the order of every one of the functions and what happens between the frames and rendering and how does coroutines work, but we also have a wonderful little flowchart. This is the script lifecycle flowchart. It talks about what the editor does, how it goes to the initialization of an object, how physics work, where it looks at inputs for events, game logic, scene rendering, gizmo rendering, and then finally comes down to disabling and decommissioning. So if you disable, destroy that particular game object, or if you get to the end of the scene. So this, I think, is a very important page. You can find it by searching for execution, or you can see it simply in the manual under scripting, scripting overview, execution order of events and functions. And I'll go ahead and paste all of this stuff on the archive page. So yes, Dropbox is really great. But at the same time, and I don't really want to get very far into this, but this is relatively easy to set up. If you are sharing a project or you're sharing a project with yourself, use version control. I'm using SourceTree. And I'm using Bitbucket, a free private repository. And so I can save my projects using version control, and Unity is very, very good and works with it very well. So if you're doing work and you're sharing a project with somebody else, don't use Dropbox unless you're absolutely sure that you want to hand it off without limit, and they're going to work with it and then hand it back. Two people working on the same project in Dropbox is a recipe for disaster. You should use proper version control. I should do a session on version control, but pro tip, learn it. It's really easy. I was quite surprised at how easy it was, especially with some of these new front ends like SourceTree on the Mac and Bitbucket on the web that's holding my repositories. There's lots of different ways that you can deal with that. So definitely don't use Dropbox for sharing files, but don't use that for a replacement of version control. While we're talking about simple scripting, let's take a look at scripting in Unity. Let's create a very simple C# script. My test script. My test script. This be my test script. We'll have to fix that. Okay, adding the T. Let's just go ahead and edit this. This is going to cause all sorts of errors, which is what I wanted to show. Was showing some errors. And remember, I've changed the T in my file on the desktop, so I need to change the T here, or in my project, so that that my script name matches the class inside it. What I wanted to show you is errors. I didn't really think about it. I've got lots of errors. Actually, only two. How do we read them, and what do they mean? Well, the console. Well, let's pretend we don't have the console open at all. How do we get the console open? Well, in the footer is our most recent message or error. Clicking that will bring up the console. If we want to bring it up manually, it'll be under Window, Console, or Control-Shift-C or Command-Shift-C on the Mac, and that'll bring up the console. And it's dockable, so we can go ahead and dock that into any one of our panes. And then the console is divided into two sections. You can see if I'm moving this little section here. And the top part gives us a list of errors. And if we have too many, we get a little scroll bar. I've crushed it down, but this little scroll bar appears on the side. The bottom section, though, is just for, it seems kind of silly. Why are you displaying just the same line? Well, some errors can be many, many, many pages long, especially if you include the trace to figure it back the path that it caused from the initial user event that comes down to the final error. And the other difference between the top and the bottom is the bottom part is copyable and pastable. So you can, I'm just going to paste this into back into MonoDevelop here. So you can copy and paste the information that you get from this bottom line in Unity, whereas you can't copy and paste the error message at the top. So if you wanted to say go to the forum and say I'm having trouble, my script isn't working, here's the error, you can copy it out of the bottom part of the console and paste it into your forum post. Excuse me. Now, if you double click on one of these, it should load up the exact line. Now, someone was saying they were having problems with the lines. I seem to be going to the correct line, so I'm not clear as to why the line isn't working for other people. Unexpected symbol instance. Oh, that's because I've got collider up here, because we left that up here and we saved it. So I'm going to delete the excess collider. That's probably what was giving us the original error. And then we save this, and then we should get a bunch more. Ooh, look at that. So how do we read these? Well, the first part is they give us the path, and they tell us where in the project the file is that's causing the problem, which in this case is assets reference support example.cs, and then on line 18. And I believe the next bit, which I don't really pay much attention to, is 23 characters in on the line. Then it gives us an error number and then a description. And it's telling me the type or namespace item list could not be found. Are we missing a using directive or an assembly reference? In this case, I've just copied and pasted a script from a different project, so I have not defined what item list is. I don't have the class defined, so this script is breaking, and that's true for all of these. Item list has not been defined. Neither has inventory item. So I have classes here that haven't been defined. Dictionary, generic dictionary, is because I'm not using the correct namespace. So if we look at this one specifically, it's telling me dictionary could not be found. Are you missing the using directive or assembly reference? And the error is CS02246. We'll look at this in a second. The way I can fix this is simply by adding that using system.collections.generic, because this is a generic dictionary. So now if I use the namespace, we should see that particular error goes away. It's replaced by another error because this script is, as I said, just nipped out of a different project. So normally we don't need to know what these error messages mean. We can find out what's going on just by reading the text. And there are some that are very simple. I'm just going to put this back under wraps. Put this back into so it doesn't compile. And let's get rid of all this junk. And say things like debug.log. Debug.log. Hello world. And I'm deliberately missing that semicolon. Save that, come back to Unity, and we'll see that we have an unexpected symbol. And this one's a little bit tricky because we are missing that semicolon. So what it's doing is it's bumping into that end bracket and saying, huh, what's there? And we have a parsing error. And again, we can see the line numbers and how many characters in. And so it should be pretty easy for us to say we bumped into this final bracket. What's the problem? Back up. We need a semicolon. But let's say we did want to find out what that number is. Well, our wonderful support leader, Graham Dunnett, has given us a nice page, 2 pages here, which you can search in answers, which is, what are these C# error messages for? So here's the other pro tip and trick. Both JavaScript compiler errors and C# error messages. So you can search through these and it'll tell you what they are, and then you can follow the link and you will get a list of other people who are describing that that particular error, and you can see that quite a few of them have answers. So these are quick hot, sort of a grand central station for what to do if you have a problem with with an error message, you can follow it through and see if somebody else has answered it. And this one particular one has 2 answers and 2,000 views. So I'm presuming it has actually solved people's problems. So again, I'll paste the URLs to this, but you can quickly search this onto answers. What are the C# error messages and what are the JavaScript compiler errors? So that's sitting there on our answer side. And again, coming back to Unity, just don't forget when you're reading it, you're going to get a path to the script, and usually the first time you click on it, it'll highlight that asset, or if it's a runtime error, highlight the game object that's causing the problem, and then you can see the line number, you can see the error number, and then a description of the error. Hotkeys. There's a blog post. This is slightly out of date because it's missing one thing, but there's a blog post of all of our hotkeys. We have a lot of hotkeys. Did you know that we had selection groups? You can load, you can save and load selection groups. Very useful. You can also not only frame selected on an object, but you can actually follow that object as it moves through the environment. Let me go back and fix our test script because it's gonna sort of blow things up here for now. And we'll try to get into some other more interesting tips and tricks in just a sec. Let's clear that. And so when we're looking through the scene, I've got a scene up here by Steve-O. It should be Michael-O. Michael-O. I borrowed this off of one of our other evangelists. This is you can get this on the asset store. And we hit the frame selected. And that will show us the thing that we're looking for. And speaking of which, we were in 2D mode. So there's the 2D key and the 3D key, so we can go between 2D and 3D mode. We've got fog on. So what we're looking at right now is the scene, but we've got our fog on, so I'm going to turn our effects fog off so we can see it a little better. And so we can frame selected with the key, so you can pick an object either in the scene and hit the F key and frame selected and you'll zoom in on it, or you can pick an object in the hierarchy and hit the F key and you will zoom in on that. And we've got something in the way is what we've got. There's our lamp. But let's say we have something that's moving. How do we deal with that? So let's say we have, let's just create a ball. So let's just close down our hierarchy a little bit. And let's create a sphere. And frame selected, remember that's F under edit. Frame selected, we will zoom in on that a little bit. Woo! And let's do another little trick. I want to add a rigid body to this. And you know how we can add a rigid body with it selected? We can click on add component. We can go to physics. We can go to rigid body, add it. On the other hand, Shift Control or Shift Command A brings up the add component menu and puts the cursor into the search box. So then I type RI, there's the rigid body, and I hit return. We now have a rigid body attached to the sphere, and I did it by simply Shift Command or Shift Control A, RI, return. And we've got a rigid body attached. So let's save this, and let's hit play, and it's a big long slow scene. There we go. Whoa, and it disappears. We've got our little guy down here. We don't need to be. We're not following the first-person shooter. I'm looking at the first-person capsule. I'm looking at the scene view. Let's say I want to follow that ball while it moves in the scene view, while it moves through the scene, so I can do some debugging. I'm going to lift this up a little bit higher so we get a better look at it. Let's say 150, and then F for frame selected. So with that selected, and I hit play, it drops, and I can't see it anymore. But if I hit Shift F when I'm in play mode, you see we're now falling with the object. That's Shift F. So in scene view, and again I'm looking at my scene view, not the game view, I can follow that object by not F will focus it, but if we hit F when we're in play, it's going to drop, and we'd have to keep slamming that F key multiple times. But when you hit Shift F, you move with the object as it goes. The camera, scene view camera, moves with the object. So just remember that Shift F is one of the hotkeys that's kind of useful. Yes, and the hotkey for pausing during playing the editor is Yeah, it's Control-Shift-P. Command-Shift-P on the Mac. And Command or Control-P to play and stop. Absolutely. Some of the other things that people don't know about is the right-click. So when we're dealing with hotkeys, we've got our transform tools at the top, our hand, and with our hand key, hand tool, we can move around the scene view. Then with our translate tools, we can move and scale and rotate. We don't need the Q key. We can be in any of the other W, E, and R. We can be in translate, rotate, or scale, and we can hold down the Alt key, and we can rotate around whatever we're focused on. Alt and Control, and we have zoom. And on the Mac, Alt and Command, we go back to that pan key. So those are really nice shortcuts. But the nice thing that a lot of people don't know about is the right mouse button means that we're now pivoting around the camera in first-person mode, unlike the Alt key and left mouse, where we're rotating around our focus point. With the right mouse, we're rotating around the camera. And if you hold down the W, A, and S keys, you can fly through your scene. So when you're holding down the right mouse button, you're acting kind of like you're in flight mode. There we go. And it is the way you're facing. You're not going to be able to go up unless you face up. So there's no rise ups. But if you're holding down the right mouse button, you can look around with sort of mouse look, and you can fly using the W, A, S, and D keys. Now, one of the things that people have worried about is saving their game while playing. And sometimes they are doing something and the scene isn't moving very much. I mean, if we were in this particular scene and we started editing, we might not tell the difference between the scene playing and the scene not playing, so we can make changes that aren't saved. Yes, the buttons at the top have gone blue. But another quick tip or trick is to go to the Preferences, and in Preferences, change the tint of the play mode. And you can go to Colors, and there is a thing called Play Mode Tint, which is a slight darker gray. So when we hit play, it gets a little bit darker. But you can change this around to being, come on, Mr. Color Picker, anything you'd like. Now, some of this gets kind of ridiculous, as you could make it black, and you wouldn't be able to see a thing, which is kind of silly. But you could pick a tint color that is very obvious and something that you wouldn't normally have, and still be able to read what's going on. So it reminds you that you are in play mode. So you can give yourself a good strong tint color. And that's easily resettable. 100. So another quick tip. So just if you find yourself in play mode and not trying to making changes that you can't save, hint yourself that you're in play mode by changing the tint color. Other editor tricks: debug mode. Little pull down button up here, which gives us some nice little options. And one of the big ones here is debug. And when we're in debug mode, the inspector changes. And a couple of things that we get to see, which I haven't really found that useful, but I'm sure if you're debugging something very big and very important, you might need to know. Things like the instance ID of the game object, the local identifier in the file. But one of the things that is very useful about this is that if you have private variables, things that you can't normally see in the inspector, but obviously Unity does know about them, well, then if you're in debug mode, you can go ahead and see that. So let's just create a quick script here, and let's add a private int, my int, and private bool, my bool. Probably good enough for example purposes. And that's in my test script, and we can drag that onto our sphere. Oh, there it is. And you can see that those two private variables are not visible. Debug mode. And there they are, my int and my bool. So we can see in debug mode some of the things that are going on behind the scenes that we wouldn't normally want to see or expect to see inside the editor. So just be aware that you can go into debug mode and get more information about the inspector. And while we're here, did you know that you can lock the inspector? That's this little lock up here. So if I see, notice that I'm on the sphere, I've locked the inspector, and now I can select other game objects, and I can't inspect them. That seems kind of silly. Why would I want to lock the inspector so I can't see what I'm doing? Well, there are some good reasons for that. Because let's say we want to add a new tab, and it's an inspector. Now I have two. And I could dock that inspector down below. So now I've got two inspectors. What could we do with this? Well, let's lock the one at the bottom, and I'm looking at the ground, and then I can look at the sphere, and I can start to compare two game objects side by side by having two inspectors, one of which is locked to a particular game object, and the other of which is free-floating. I can make as many of these as I wanted, so I could put 5 or 6 game objects next to each other. There are some other useful applications for this. So let me unlock this inspector down here. I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings, Time. And this includes things including my time scale. And it was Duck, or Ben Pitt, one of our other guys in the field team, that showed me this. And so then we lock this, and then we go back to our normal gameplay here. But we now have a time scale window, so we can hit play. Let's frame selected again on that sphere. Let's make our sphere selected. So there's our sphere. Let's go ahead and hit play, and then once it's started, let's change the time scale. Shift F. So now we can change the time scale of our game. And notice that you can see in the background that I can make the particle systems go backwards over here by changing my time scale to a negative. But I can change the time scale of my game now by having this inspector window open because I've got two locked windows. I'm going to go ahead and close that one. One other thing you can do with these locking the inspector, let's say we have a list or an array. Public, say game object array. And let's just call this my, my go array. And we come back to Unity, and there it is. Come on, compile. You can do it. So there's my game object array. And if we had a bunch of game objects, let's say, let's make some cubes. And then I'm going to duplicate this a bunch of times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. I want to add these cubes to this list. And one of the things that I can do is, select my sphere, which has the array on it, and you can drag one at a time onto the list. And by putting it over the name, it'll add it to the array. But this is a pain. I've got to add all of these. And what if I miss one and I misdrag it and I drag two at once? But if I come here and I try to select a group, I'm no longer inspecting my sphere. I'm inspecting this group of cubes. So one of the things that you can do, I'm going to clear this out by just making that 0. Back to 0 again. I can lock the inspector, so I'm not looking off of my group of cubes. I can select my group of cubes and then put the group of cubes onto the array, and they've all gone in. So one other fun trick. We're running out of time. Still have got lots of these little tricks. I mean, only on page 1 of about 5 pages of trips. And so I'm going to do some more of these sessions and see where we go. This is a moody map of... just delete these guys here. So I've got a pretty... here's another one. Shift space. And we get full screen. So we've got a pretty moody gray skied box around our little game here. Let's say we want to make it nice and sunny. We can change out the skybox. So go to our skyboxes in our medieval environment. Where is it? I'll search for sky. Skybox. So there's our skyboxes, and here's sunny, and there's the sunny material. So I can go in my scene, I can go to my edit, just let's go edit render settings, and then change out my skybox. And let's put in sunny. Yay! Okay, so suddenly I've got a nice bright sunny skybox, but I still got that, you know, Game of Thrones moody kind of lighting. And I also need to change where the sun is coming from. So let's take my directional light, which is going to be my sun, and I'm going to reset its position just because I want to know where it is. I'm going to lift it up by 100 and then frame selected on it. So there it is. I just wanted, it was buried. I happen to know that the sun is, this directional light is buried inside the town somewhere, and it isn't very helpful. But how do I get this now to point as if it's coming from that sun? Well, the trick is to put the light on the sun, just like that. And then there is a thing called align with view. I'm focused because when I hit the frame selected or the focus key, I'm focused on that light. So it's the center of my view. So then when I look around, if I put the light directly in the middle of the sun, I'm looking straight ahead at the object and straight ahead at the sun. So I can say game object align with view. And so now that game object, that directional light, is looking exactly where I am, which is right at the sun. So I'm going to hit frame selected again, so I can get my directional light in front of me, because it's actually right where I am right now, so frame selected. So there's my light again. But I want it to rotate around now 180 degrees. It's pointing directly at the sun. So I can grab either one of these axes and spin it around, but if I want it to be exactly 180 degrees, then what you can do is hold the control key down for snapping and snap it around until it's facing exactly, oops, come back here, exactly the other direction. There we go. So now we've lit our game to be exactly from that sun. I mean, arguably it's a bit gloomy. Again, we could take a look at our directional light and brighten it up. 0.6, 0.65, get it nice and bright, and then maybe we want it to be a tad bit hotter. And then walk around. So that's now lit. And lit to our skybox. A little bit brighter. With our castle. Birds in the sky. And there's our sun. Woo! Anyway, so that's the session. I will come back and do more. But more tips and tricks later on. Try to schedule them. This is kind of fun. We'll try to get into something a little bit more meaty. I know that we had a lot of what Unity website is like today, but I did want to get that out of the way. Questions. I don't have a lot of time tonight to answer questions, so what questions do you have that I can answer in the next, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes? Here, I'll put up some fun eye candy here for us to look at in the background. The scene is actually available from the asset store. I'm having trouble loading it. We had some planned downtime today. The asset store was, we were implementing, if I remember correctly, a new language, new localization. Yeah, so that would be, is he still Michael O? He's changed the name of his company. Yep. Manufactura K4 is who this is from, and this would be not Medieval Village, it's Medieval Environment. At least. But anyway, you can search for Manufactura K4 or Michael O, Dark City Pirates Island, Medieval Environment. Here it is. I'll post that for you in just a second. So this is the environment that I'm using. We come back to something, again, so like I said, something sexy. Yeah, I believe the birds are particle systems. Contab 9 I did not model it, obviously. I got it from the asset store, which I can use for demo purposes. You can purchase it from the asset store. How long did it take for that to be modeled? That's hard to say. It really depends upon how fast you are. He pumps out a lot of material. He's a very fast artist. The trains and the bird do look good. Turkatunali. There is a video about terrain building in the archives, but I would like to do one as well, more into sort of terrain sculpting. But we will. It's on the plans, but I don't really have it. I don't have a date for it yet on how you make terrain. But essentially, you pull and push it around. I mean, I can show you very briefly. You have to realize this is going to be not as pretty as Michael O because we don't have the time. But there is a demos. He gives us a blank one. Test scene. Don't save. And this I was pulling around the terrain earlier today. So you can see it's just, I was actually having a fun fuss with it. So I'm going to bring this all down, use a big brush, and flatten it. And so essentially it's a big grid of triangles in a square plane terrain, and we are given brushes to change the height and brushes to change the textures on it. And then what I'm doing here is I'm using a brush to just sort of flatten everything down. And I'll show you in a second. There's probably a way I can just flatten it. I've forgotten how. I haven't done terrain per se in a for my own purposes in quite some time. But so I'm just using this to pull the height down. So then we can put the height up. We can put the height to a level. We can pick a level. We can also soften things. So I mean, if I want to soften these edges, I can just sort of generally soften what's going on. Woof! It just relaxes all the math that's making these. So what we do when you're making a quick terrain is you pick a bunch of different brushes and you can raise or lower the terrain. Make it as rough. This is very strong. You can change the, how strong things are. This is making it, like I said, way too rough. If we wanted to, we could soften that back again. And we end up with some rough shapes for our terrain. You can then paint your textures on top of it. You can then paint, you can add trees to it. Now I'm going to go back to the one that we just were in. So you've brought up your terrain, but then you also have to be careful about the additional modeling that you do, because if we look carefully, we'll see that there is terrain here, which if we were to fuss around with it, you can see it's changing. And it's part of the undo chain, so I can undo all those changes. But then you get objects like this, which is a rock that's been added on top of the geometry to make it look even rougher. So the softer things you can do by pulling the terrain around in the terrain tool, and then you add your trees, you add your geometry rocks on top of it to give it that feel. If that makes any sense. The question was, will we make a security class, and can we show how to use get and set? And the answer is yes, we can do that. I would again say go down to the teaching section and put in a request, and I'll take a look at what people are really looking for, and I'll start to use that to pick which classes I do next. What software do I use for version control? Currently, I'm using Mercurial or HG, though there are many other solutions to that. And the software I'm using is a source tree on the Mac, and I'm saving my files on Bitbucket. But again, there are a bunch of different choices. Could I print that hotkey page? Oh, yes, I probably could. No, I did. I did. That's coming up. Did I do that? The blogs page? I thought I did. That's the blogs. The hotkey page, yeah, is back there. It's yeah, I did send it. You'll have to back read and chat. And the birds are a particle. Ab949, in your upcoming tiles video, are you going to go into doing collisions for the tiles like a Mario-style platformer? No, this is primarily scrolling backgrounds. That's going to be primarily how to do scrolling backgrounds and how to build up an environment, a scrolling environment, probably in 2D or 2.5D. But we can do something where it's going to make a big difference also with our edge effectors in 5. I'm probably going to do a lot more Mario-style stuff in 5 because the way you can jump up and through platforms. Turcotunale, I do believe that I can play and update C# script in play mode to see effects in real time, but and now it tries to compile and reset the scene. You can make changes to your game during playtime, but you can't save those changes in the scene. And in some cases, if you make a change to the C# script and you save it, the scene may lose track of where it is, because when it goes through the process of recompiling, it takes data away from the scene, saves it internally, reloads the assemblies, and then brings everything back. And occasionally, depending upon how you've done your scene could not play right after there's been a compile during playtime. So just be careful of compiling during playtime. It's best to do it during edit time. Add 1B, yeah, I'm going to do something that'll compile all of these tips and tricks together. I'm not just sure where, when, and how. Contab 9, could you please make a simple tip on how to create water in Unity? The best thing to use is one of the water textures. If you get into mesh deformation, trying to make waves rather than just the appearance of water, then it becomes incredibly more complicated. And we could try to do a class in that, but it's certainly a subject that lasts longer than a day. Let me just look at we can look at the water that they've done here. Pink. This is using, if we frame selected on it, it's going to be, it surrounds the entire horizon as far as the eye can see, so that it looks normal. But you can zoom in on it, and it is just a plane. So if you get below it, it disappears. So it's a plane with a texture. But it looks pretty good when it's running. And this is, actually, I'm gonna look at it in the scene view mode. Come back here, please. There we go. Turn off maximize on play. So, I mean, a lot of the water textures that people have are pretty effective at making water seem to be water. And this is just a demo level. It's not really a game, so it's not seated properly in the it's not seated perfectly the way you probably would make a production level. This is just to show off the assets that he's selling. So oops, we've gotten below the plane. But feels like water, so I would use one of the built-in water textures, and then it's a whole nother layer of research to make deformed water. So Contab, if you're very interested, there's a big thread. Let's see if I can find it on the forum. It's in my watch list, but I'm not sure how to get to those in the new forum. So let's do community water. There we go. And this has spawned a lot of debate. It's been around for a long time. It's somewhat idle now, but it's definitely worth a back read through some of the things that people have done, taking some of the code that's available. And it is using deformed meshes and that sort of thing, and buoyancy. But it also is relatively intensive on the device. So let's see if I can find it. Do you know how to start a game but to keep the view in the scene without automatically going into game view? Yes, that's with when you're in Unity. It's whether you choose to maximize on play. That's this button down here. If maximize on play is selected, it will fill the screen with the game video. If maximize on play is not selected, then when you hit play, you'll see the game playing down at the bottom and the scene at the top. Fresna, you can make... I made and sold games with the free version and used the money that I made on the free version to buy my pro license. Well, it's a bit of a lie because when I was doing it, there was no free version, but I had the cheap version, and I used the money from the cheap version to buy the expensive version, and then version 2 or something like that, they ended up making a free version. But yes, you can make and sell games with a free version. Terrain is an asset rather than a component. It's all built into one. Main CPP, if you're having trouble opening the asset store other than right now, because I think they were doing some planned maintenance, you can put in a support request because you should be able to open that up without a problem. Is the code used in previous live sessions available anywhere? It should be available with the lesson in the Learn Lesson section, and if it's not, it will be on the asset store. If you have any questions, post that in the forum. Best place to ask questions and to post things is in the forum. So, forum. But where I'd like you to go to is the teaching section into the live training thread. So if you have any questions, post them here. So we're in home, forum, general teaching. And then you can put in recommendations, requests, that sort of thing. And I'll get to them as soon as possible. Terrain is an asset. So if you want to create a new terrain, you can just go to, I think it's game object, create other terrain. Blend shapes for waves, Grim Fandango. That's actually an interesting theory. I'd love to hear more about that. Blend shapes for waves. Oh, actually, I'm going to write that down. That is a tip and trick. I've got one from you. Oh, I've come down to the end. Thank goodness. I didn't get into platform-specific code. I'm going to do another one of these. I'm going to keep these up because I think they're fun. It's a great way to load up a bunch of just sort of little things that don't fit into any other suggestion. So yes, we will do some more. I need to get out of here. Thanks for coming. Let me just throw up some of our typical end banter here. So thank you for coming, and you can follow us on Twitter, at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, at Will Goldstone, and me at The Ant Ranch. That's Adam Buckner. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the teaching forum under the topic or thread live training. Any suggestions, criticisms, comments, care packages, that sort of thing, leave them there. We will be doing more, and I will be doing my best to get these up fast. So I've got to get this. I've got 3 of them to get up. So that's going to be my next few days. Editing these down and getting them up. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave up some eye candy for a little bit, and then I'm going to sign off. But I'll give you something to go home on. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to go off, Mike.